What is a restaurant or product or a hospitality experience that you love and would highly recommend to a good friend? What was it about that brand that really hooked you? And what would you say about it to somebody else? My guest and branding strategist and storyteller, Cheryl Farr, points out that a brand is not so much about what we say about ourselves, but what other people say about you. Or to echo the words of Amazon founder Jeff Bezos, a brand is what people say when you're not in the room. In this conversation, Cheryl and I talk about how she helps teams create brands people trust and love, and her path to learn and get really good at her craft. Her journey reminds and teaches us how we can connect the dots among our different passions and experiences to create a work life we love while helping others put their best foot forward. Cheryl brings a rare and refreshing depth of care, commitment, insight, and wisdom to her approach to brand creation and strategy. Let's dive in. Cheryl, thank you so much for being in Making Business Art today. Welcome.
Thank you, Ezekiel. Thanks you for having me. I'm really glad to be here with you.
I'm very excited to speak with you today. We're going to speak about your brand expertise. I do want to make a few stops along your career journey. So we're going to jump in the time machine and go back and just kind of do some reflection and then come back to your current life expert. But before we jump into all of that, I just want to open up this conversation by asking you, who is Harry Carson and what is your favorite thing about him?
So Harry Carson is my Shih Tzu. He's 7 years old, and he has a voice on the internet. He's on Instagram, and I started him on Instagram because we travel together. He goes places with me. He travels on planes and goes all over the country. And my favorite thing about him, he's actually sitting right over here, is how game he is to do whatever I want him to do, except swim in the pool. But other than that, he's pretty game to do whatever I want him to do. And he's a good boy.
He is the cutest little Ewok. I saw a post, you posted a picture of him wearing some shoes.
Yes. Yes. I live here in Palm Springs, California. And of course, the whole Southwest is going through quite a heat wave at the moment that we are recording. And so he has little heat resistant shoes that he wears when we go on walks so that he doesn't burn his feet. And he's pretty good about wearing them. As soon as he figured out that he could put them down on the ground and that he could feel his feet and feel the ground, he was like, okay, this is fine. I can do this. See, he's very game.
He's so cute. All right, Cheryl. So let's get started here with our conversation. First question I'd like to ask is, where do you work and what do you get paid to do?
Okay. I have a firm called Signal Brand Innovation that I have had since 2009, and I've been the sole owner of it since 2015. And we used to actually work in Denver and had a fixed regular office, like in downtown Denver, regular office space. And that was pre-pandemic, of course. Now the team is remote, like so many of us are. And Signal Brand Innovation is a brand consultancy and strategic design firm. What we do is really help organizations align their brand strategy with their business strategy in order to take some great leap forward. So whether that's enter a new category or acquire a new audience or launch a new product or whatever that might be, a merger or an acquisition, spinoff, whatever that bit change is, we're actually helping them navigate that change. Sometimes they're going through a shift in who their target customer is or marketplace dynamics, and they need to really relaunch their brand. We are first and foremost brand strategists, really about helping brands and brand leaders really set that trajectory, cast the vision for their brand, and then really bring it to life. So that's what I get paid to do, is help people cast the vision for their brand and then bring it to life.
Well, even in this good year of 2023, I still come across some conceptions of brand that I think are kind of off. So can you tell me, what is your definition of brand?
So I say that a brand is two things. It's the perceptions you own and the promise you make delivered at all points of contact to create a total brand experience. Perceptions you own, the promise you make are the two components that make up a brand. A lot of people think your brand is your logo and your colors and all of those things. Those are really simply the expressions of your brand. Your brand at the heart and soul is really that set of commitments, that you make, a limited set of perceptions, and that commitment
Mhm.
that you make to what people are going to get when they engage with you. And then those perceptions, what Jeff Bezos some years ago said, something that I think is one of the best definitions of brand, that brand is what people say about you when you're not in the room. So
Mhm.
it's really not
Mhm.
what you say about yourself, but what others say about you. So how do you control your brand? How do you manage your brand? If you're really, if it's what they say about you, well, it's about managing the perceptions around your brand with extreme intentionality so that you act, talk, behave, express yourself in a way that people will say what you would like them to say about you. I always use the example about trust, right? People say all the
Mhm.
time, you see it, number one trusted brand. Well, nobody believes that, right? You can't say it about yourself. What you have to do is behave in
Mhm.
a way that people will say it about you. All I can do is serve my clients in such a way that I do what I say I'm going to do and I deliver on my commitments and I show up when I'm supposed to and so on and so forth so that they say, Cheryl, that's somebody I can really trust. Me saying about myself doesn't matter. All that matters is when they say it about me. So my job is to then, and what a brand's job is to reinforce those perceptions at all points of contact so that people say the things that the brand wants or the brand team wants them to say. That's how I think
Well,
about
I
brand.
find it very useful to define what things are and then what they're not, just for
Mhm,
extra clarity. So
mhm.
can we just do another pass at like what is not a brand?
Yeah. So a brand is not your logo. A brand is not your colors. A brand is not your slogan, right? Or your tagline or whatever that might be called. A brand is not your marketing campaign, right? People deliver brands. That's people deliver brands. So a brand is actually made up of interactions, right? It's the experience that you have when you engage. So it's people are always so surprised when I say a brand is not your logo, a brand is not your name, a brand is not, those are not, those are simply expressions of your brand, right? They are carriers of your
Mhm.
brand and they are commitments. But at the end of the day, how you deliver on those commitments is where your brand really lives, right? Brands are delivered in
Mhm.
relationship, they're delivered in actions, they're delivered in experiences. And those physical expressions of the brand are gateways, right? They're promises, they're commitments. And then how you deliver is really where the brand lives. Brands live in people
Mhm.
and they're delivered by
Yeah.
people.
So would you say that saying that a brand is like a way of being, would that kind of be fair or under the umbrella of your thoughts about brand?
100%. Brand
Mhm.
is absolutely a way of being. A brand is It's a set of I also think of brand as, experiences that you create and benefits that you offer. So, a brand can offer functional benefits, right? Gatorade delivers I drink Gatorade and I get electrolyte replacement after a workout or whatever that
Mhm.
looks like. But in reality, brands create emotional experiences. Right?
Mhm.
They create how do you feel, right? All brands make us all brand interactions create emotional experiences. Humans are fundamentally we're about 96% emotion. We're all 96% of the time we're experiencing emotions. And so brands deliver emotional experiences and emotional benefits. So how does it make me feel to drink Gatorade? It makes me feel like an athlete, right? Brands also deliver self-expressive benefits. What does it say to others about me, right?
Right.
When I'm engaging with the brand, what car I drive, what clothes I wear, whatever that looks like, what gym I go to, whatever that looks like, what team I root for. But I think more importantly, one of the things we've seen the evolution of what brands are about is a benefit that we call self-actualizing benefits. What do brands, I think, and has almost superseded this idea of self-expressive benefits. What
Mm.
does engaging with the brand say to me about me? Right. So
Yeah.
what as I think about my portfolio, my life and my identity and my way of being, right? What does engaging with certain brands say about that? What does it mean if I'm putting my energy into going to the gym and working in joining a group or being part of a certain community? I drive a Mini, right? And I love my Mini, and it's a huge part of my
Mhm.
identity. And I love I wait here in town, I'm driving my Mini around or I go out of town and we wait and Mini drivers wave to each other. We get excited about seeing each other and people wave to each other. And I think that's really exciting, right? It says, and that's something I love to be a part of. It makes me happy to be a part of a community like that. So I think when I think about, yes, I think brands are absolutely ways of being, and that when brands, the most exciting thing about a brand is that it allows you to raise your hand and really signal what you stand for so that people who will respond to what you have to offer can find you, right? It's really, I think brands are so exciting when they're really authentic, when they're really clear about who they are and what makes them what's meaningful about what they deliver and when they're clear about what's different about them. And that so people who will respond to that really can find them. That's really exciting to me.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it's one reason why I reached out to you to have this conversation is I just have been really connecting with your posts on LinkedIn and your approach to branding. And I think when like a company or a brand, they're going after like we want to be number one or make the most amount of money. I just don't find like those goals like very energizing. Like
Hmm.
it's like okay, but I think to what you were just saying is like really resonating and connecting with people and making that connection. I think that's a whole other level of game that obviously resonates with this project and really resonates with me. So in the spirit of that, can you just tell me more about your philosophy around branding and like what really makes a brand awesome? And feel free to throw in an example if you have one or two.
Sure. What really makes a brand awesome? So I use a filter to really help when I'm setting a brand strategy and helping a team really understand and a leader's team really understand they can own, what they can stand for. I use three simple filters to really process through all the insights and all the information to really determine. And I call that true, meaningful, and different. What is true to who you are or who you can be at your very best? What I'll call is an achievable true. It can be something that you have to pursue, but it is something you can achieve. Who you are or who you can be at your very best. What is most meaningful to your target audiences, those you have and those you want, right? And that's inside and outside the organization. And then what makes you dramatically different from other choices that your audiences have. And those can be direct choices or those can be indirect choices. Right now in the higher education space, a big competitor for lots of schools out there is not choosing to go to school, right? So we have to put all those choices on the table,
Mhm,
right? In terms of
mhm,
direct competitors and indirect competitors. So when you think about that, and when you say competitors, not just for wallet, time, attention, heart share, mind share, all of those things.
mm,
So true, meaningful, different. When you find so often brands do not look through that lens, it's so simple, right? Think of it as a Venn diagram. The magic is when you can really find intersection, that sweet spot of what's true to who you are, meaningful to the audiences you have, those you have and those you want, and different from other choices that they have. So often brands pursue different for the sake of difference, or they'll
Mhm.
pursue a customer that they really want without real clarity on how they deliver differently or what they do. So they'll pursue one or two of those things, but the magic is in all three. And Ezekiel, the interesting thing is
Mhm.
that the one I see by far neglected the most is true. Most
Mm.
organizations don't stop to look within about to really say,
Yeah.
okay, who are we? What is written on our DNA? Why are these people together in this room, in this organization? And why isn't it other people? Why is it these people? What is it we get up and get really excited to get out of bed every day to make happen in the world? What good thing do these people uniquely do and bring to the world? Or how do they do it in such a way? And that's the thing that gets neglected the most. And it's so exciting to me. So often you, the answer is within, right? The answer, it's not about going out and saying, oh, gee, what's out there in the world that we can own? It's actually often so much about really looking within and articulating often what's already there or articulating in a way that makes it truly meaningful, truly different. And that's really exciting to me. There's nothing more
Mhm.
exciting when a team comes together and goes, that's what we've been trying to say for years, right? And but it's so often it's hard to see yourself clearly, right? You need outside expertise to come in and see things and help you articulate things clearly. That's where when you can really articulate what is true about you. And sometimes that means articulating the things that, being honest about what you're not, right? We already talked about what's not, being honest about what you're
Mhm.
not, in addition to what you are. Because when you can let go of that, you don't have to be all things to all people. When you get really clear and focused on what you do really well and what you don't do that other people can do, and really connect those dots to what's meaningful to your
Mhm.
audiences and what's different, you really start to get clear on who you are and who you are authentically as a collective, as a group of people, as an organization, small or large, and what's yours to own. And I think that gets really exciting. And that's where I think the magic lives. And then when you can use that as a filter to decide what to do from there, that gets really exciting. So that's my
Yeah.
philosophy around about where brands start, really rooted in true, meaningful, and different.
Yeah. I think all of that, it on one hand, it sounds nice and simple, but it's tremendously challenging. Because
Yes.
I can also hear to get to that truth and to get to that clarity and to get to the self awareness,
Hmm.
at least in my own lived experience, personal experience, and also just working in my working life, I do recognize that I imagine that you encounter fear and
Hmm.
constriction
Hmm.
and a number of other or things that need to be kind of cleaned up and cleared away to get to that goodness, to that to the yummy center, right? Can you tell me more about what is that you frequently might encounter that you have to nurture or help a team sort of clear away before getting to the center of the lollipop?
Yeah, that's a really good question. One of the things I've learned over the years is that you can't make somebody or make a team be ready to go into a brand initiative. They have to actually be kind of ready for it. You can't convince somebody they need a brand. It is kind of, sometimes I even use this word, it is an intimate exercise because it's really about being willing to look at yourself in an unvarnished way, look at your organization in an unvarnished way, look at your competitors in an unvarnished way, look at your customer. And you have to be ready for that.
Mhm.
Sometimes organizations aren't. One of the things that I see on a regular basis is that what gets in the way is that people are like, okay, we're going to do our strategy and we're going to be done. And we shouldn't really invest too much time in that. We really want to get to the good stuff. And in reality, they're, they don't, once they get into the process, they realize how deep it is, right? When they start asking themselves questions and they start unpacking and we start to bring them insights and they start to really process the implications, they say, oh, this is a lot bigger than we realized it was.
Mhm.
And that's a barrier because so often people don't realize the depth of and the hard work that it takes to really get to that yummy center, right? I've recently worked with a higher education institution to help them define their brand. And they did a wonderful job because they brought together a multidisciplinary brand team from across the institution. This is another barrier that gets in the way is when people think brand is owned in marketing. Brand isn't owned in marketing, right?
Mhm.
Because brands have to be delivered on in the experience and they have to be delivered on by everyone in the organization. And they thought when we brought this team together and they really rolled up their sleeves and built their brand, we facilitated the process, but it's a co-creation process because it's their brand. They have to have a hand in building it. They actually spent the last 6 weeks on the final 5 words of their brand
Mm.
platform. And, but they weren't wheel spinning. They were really important words. And I actually told them, I said, normally I don't recommend spending 6 weeks on your last final 5 words. But what ended up happening was they actually took it really seriously and
Mm.
they had embraced so strongly how important the brand was as a platform for moving forward. There were some final details that they really had to wrestle through. And so I use that example as a good thing, even though it was a painful final 6 weeks. But the truth of the matter is, so often, if people don't take care and they say, oh, well, we'll just say this and we'll say that. And then they
Mm.
haven't really wrestled through the
Mhm.
implications. So they haven't really taken seriously the weight of those
Mhm.
decisions because those become decision filters when you set your brand. You're really setting decision filters for a way forward and that everyone is coming behind and you're agreeing on pursuing together. And so it's really important and incumbent on me and my team that we make it clear the weight and import of making those decisions, really getting clear and then making really good decisions, honest decisions about where you can go. We never want anybody to pursue uh, a pie in the sky strategy. We're going to be the
Mhm.
number one blah, blah, blah in the world or whatever, if it's not
Mhm.
attainable. And I say I'd prefer a 80% strategy or a 70% strategy that's actually achievable versus a 100% strategy that's going to sit on the shelf. What can we really get done? Right.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
so a few answers to your question there in terms
Yeah.
of barriers.
Well,
What can really get in the way?
yeah, I think coming back to the desire of being number one or hitting a certain budget, I think
Mhm.
those are more results that emerge from being awesome,
Yeah,
really.
that's exactly right.
Because when you're saying like, "Oh, we're number one," you're like, "I don't care." But if the brand is really connecting and solving a problem and doing it in a very warm, humane way that connects with people, I think that's where you see the loyalty really start to form and crystallize over time.
And that awesomeness, that magic comes from really knowing who you are and really knowing who your customer is and really knowing what makes you stand out, right? And when you know that, there's
Mhm.
so much confidence that comes in that. And when you realize what as a collective of people, when you really rally around those ideas, that's an exciting place to be. It's fun. It's fun and awesome to know what it is that you, who you are and what you can do and who you can be that nobody else is. And one of the things brands are built from the inside out. People,
Mhm.
I've said this already, people build brands. So one of the things that happens sometimes is that you'll set a brand strategy, people like, yeah, let's go to market. It's like the first thing you have to do is educate your people on what the brand is and get them excited about it. Because how can you expect customers to love your brand until your own people do, right? If we don't love
Mhm.
our brands, why in the world would our customers care? It's why we love brands like Southwest Airlines, right? Because those people inside that brand love that brand. And that Southwest had a big epic failure, right, in the last year with
Right.
their systems going down and that kind of thing. I think that the strength of their brand, the strength of the loyalty inside that organization, the strength of the loyalty outside that organization, and their willingness to say, we really screwed up and we're dealing with it is the reason that they're going to continue, they're going to recover, and they have already recovered so substantially. And I think thrive in a way that other organizations wouldn't. I think the strength of their brand has made all the difference in their ability to uh, survive and recover from a huge epic challenge like they faced. And I think, frankly, their customers have given them a lot of grace and even gave them a lot of grace in the midst of that because they had earned so much love. I don't even want to say loyalty. It earned so much love from their customers and love from their people inside the organization. And so
Yeah.
inside out is everything, I think.
Well, Cheryl, I like to jump in the time machine and go back and look at people's past a little bit because I'm just fascinated at what people have gone through, what choices they have made, and more importantly, what they have learned that shape what they're doing and who they are today. So, in looking at your journey, I noticed that you studied history, undergraduate and graduate
Yes, they
studies.
did.
So that's quite a commitment to that topic. And so I'm just curious, what drew you to study history, and are you still a history nerd?
So I actually have a story of what drew me to study history. My mother is the eldest child. I'm the eldest child, and she was the eldest child in her family. And her parents met in Devon, England during World War II. My grandmother was an English war bride, and my grandfather was an American soldier.
Mm.
And I was fascinated by their history. I was fascinated by how they met. I was fascinated by my grandmother's English heritage. She was 20 years old when she got married and had my mom. So my mom was born in England, and so was my aunt. And
Mm.
then after the war, my grandfather came back to New Jersey, and he saved money and had to send money back so that my grandmother could come with two little babies um,
Mhm.
across the ocean to Ellis Island. And I was really fascinated by this history. And so I fell in love with history as a child. And as a matter of fact, when I was 18, I was the first person in the family to go back to England with them. And
Mm.
so they could
Mhm.
tell me, my grandfather would tell me stories about riding across the moors on his bicycle and to go visit my grandmother and stuff like that.
Mm.
And so I fell in love with history as a child, and I loved history. I loved reading history. I loved biographies. And so that connection, I think I felt really connected to their past. And so I always loved studying history. And I actually went to college to be an interior designer. I went to School of Architecture at Arizona
Oh.
State University. And
Mm.
believe it or not, I was not confident enough in my ability to draw. And so I switched my major
Mhm.
to history, which felt like a natural fit to me. And I just love studying history. And I actually studied modern European history
Mhm.
as an undergraduate student. And then I got a PhD fellowship to
Mhm.
Columbia University to
Mhm.
study history. And I actually, the day I showed up in New York City on campus, I thought, I met all these fellow students and I was excited to be there. But I realized, I
Mhm.
was like, I am not born to be an academic. I'm sitting among
Mm.
all these people who are here who are going to study for the next 7 years to get a job at Central Kentucky University, making $5. And I was like, wait a second, I don't know. I don't know if I'm cut out for this. So I actually stayed for a year and got my terminal master's in history.
Yeah.
And I am still a history nerd. I still read a lot of history. But I am happy to not be an academic. I think mostly because in academia, once you get to the graduate level, you're getting narrower and narrower and
Mhm.
narrower to where maybe I'm an expert on 17th century French pamphlets or something like that. So it can be really political pamphlets. So it's
Mhm.
really narrow and sort of I really like to learn. I like to enter new categories and learn new things. And so a broader view of history was more interesting to me, right?
Yeah.
To learn new topics and new eras and new countries and that kind of thing. So I actually went into travel writing. I actually went and my first
Mm.
job out of graduate school was for Frommer's Travel Guides. And so I was an editor at Frommer's Travel Guides and I loved it, right? Because that to me, that really took that sense of exploration and discovery
Mhm.
and really put it to work in a really exciting way. So I went into travel editing and then travel
Mhm.
writing. So, and my background in history made me a really good researcher. And I
Mm.
just always
Mhm.
had a sense of discovery and adventure that I think is born out of that love of history.
Yeah. I've been meaning to just read more history, but when I've read things that, like some books that are historical, especially about industry, I don't know if you're familiar with Tim Wu, but he's written fabulous books about just the rise of media, of like telecommunications.
Oh, really?
Or even another book I read that's very small. What's it called? The Victorian Internet, and I forget who the author is. But what's super interesting, or even like even coming across like histories from Rome, sometimes you're reading that
Mhm.
and you're like, oh my God, it's just like today, except
Huh?
different technology, but like the rent was high and people complain about the same things. It is just so interesting to see how there is it's just going back to that saying like things change but they stay the same. Like human behavior doesn't change all that much. The conditions, the technology, the world around us, the
Yeah.
built environment mainly changes, but human behavior doesn't. And so it's amazing. Like in the Victorian internet, the author discusses how people fell in love like over like telegrams, over
Hmm.
like not even that, like Morse code. Like they would be bored and they would like chat with each other, and some people got married out of just like telling like Morse coding back and forth. And it just blew my mind. Just about so I just thought for I've been thinking this for a while. Like it's like historians are like the OG data scientists because you're looking
Hmm.
at pattern recognition,
Yes.
right? Looking back, I know, is there something like in the body of history about human beings that any perspective that you pulled out of your time, like exploring history in different ways?
Well, that's a great question. Well, I think in some ways you've nailed it, right? People repeat the same humans are humans at any era in
Mm,
time, and that they certainly follow certain conventions and we have culture and that kind of thing. But at the same time, people make, we are so willing to connect with each other. People love to
mhm,
connect. When you take away those barriers, people love to connect and will find ways to connect. The Victorian internet story is absolutely wonderful, right? Morse code. We think sometimes, oh, nobody ever did it like we did. But in reality, they did,
it's like
right?
online. It's like the OG online dating, right?
The only online dating, that's awesome. Um,
It's yeah, it's amazing.
but people, I think people traveled. You
Mhm.
go to Hawaii, right? Go to the Big Island of Hawaii, and you go to the national Hawaii Volcanoes National Park, and you read about Mark Twain going and read Mark Twain's writings on Hawaii volcanoes, what he encountered there before it was a national park, when it was just an erupting volcano, and you're like, I'm having the same fundamental experience that Mark Twain is, as he was writing what is almost 200 years ago now, 150, more than 150 years ago. about the experience of watching, nature happen and engaging with people on the big island of Hawaii. And you're like, oh, that's not so different than what I'm experiencing right now. And I think our ability to connect back and
Mm.
really immerse ourselves in how people lived and realize how human behavior is constant. At the same time, what we see is we also think often that we're so much smarter than people used to be, right? We know so much more and we're so far ahead. And I'm not sure that is exactly so true. You look back at politicians in the 100, 200 years ago, and they were men of letters and they were all men, unfortunately,
Mhm.
but they were men of
Mm.
letters and they were educated and wrote poetry and were involved in business and all of these things that were so much more dynamic than just being a career politician. So sometimes things have sort of, we go through cycles I think, as humans, and sometimes we take steps backward and sometimes we take steps forward. And I think would be nicer if we felt sometimes I think if we felt like we could step back in the past and sometimes reclaim some of the dynamics of what happened in the past. That said, we also evolve forward and there are things I would never want to recreate again that
Yeah.
we've learned from, although sometimes it feels like we slip backward.
Yeah. Yeah, I do reflect on that by the way, in my own gratitude practice. I'm like, man, I love my washing machine
I know,
and air
right?
conditioning. and in some ways I know life is we all experience difficulties in life and some people more than others, but it's not that bad of a time to be alive versus some 100 years ago where many other things were happening
Yeah,
to people that were really undesirable.
that's exactly right. That's exactly right.
Mhm.
And I think sometimes it feels like we take some steps backward, but I think generally speaking, our trajectory as humans is forward. I think that
Mhm.
we have made progress. And there are things about life now that are challenging because we have evolved to where it feels like technology is at our fingertips 24/7 and we don't really shut down nearly as humans as
Mhm.
much as we should, most likely.
Mhm.
But at the same time, so much is to your point, there's so much to be grateful for. There's
Mhm.
more in terms of how we live and how resilient we are, right? How resilient we are as a people. And I think that's pretty exciting. I mean, look at what we've come through in terms of the global, the pandemic, right? And talk about connecting back to the past and everyone suddenly having a realization that, oh, 100 years ago, the Spanish flu, I suddenly have a concept of
Mhm.
what that was and what that meant,
Yeah.
right? And I think we are quite resilient. And I think we have a great capacity for joy. And I think people want to connect. I think we love to connect. I think we love to, as humans, we love to discover new things and, and we're mobile. We like to move around and
Mhm.
and I think our capacity to do those things are greater than ever before. And that's something to be really grateful for.
Yeah. So something I was curious to ask you about is those years that you spent writing at Frommer's, and I think it was like mid-90s,
Hmm.
thereabouts. What were you like your takeaways, your lessons in effectively connecting with people through all this writing and whatever else you were doing in that world, hustling, trying to get people to go on adventures in a number of ways. What's your recollection from that, and like does it still shape your work today?
So interestingly, I so Frommer's is where I discovered brand.
Mm.
And when I started at Frommer's, I started as an editor and there was a new publisher and who was from Fodor's, who was our big competitor. and they had really done really well. And so we hired away their senior managing editor. And
Poachers.
yeah, I know, right? How exciting. But he
Yeah.
came in and said, okay, we're going to reinvent this series, right? It was old. It was stayed. It hadn't changed a lot. It was very rigid. And so writers would get an outline and they'd have to fill in this outline and so it would be like, and it was the same outline, whether you were writing a guidebook to London or Winnipeg or the country of Peru. And it was all the same outline. And so you would have like what to eat in Winnipeg. And it was like Winnipeg, not a giant foodie town versus, and so you'd have these same, it was very sort of rigid and formulaic. And it's just
Mhm.
gotten that way. And so we were, our task was to reinvent a way for um, the books to actually take on more of a local nature, still feel like a series, right? Part
Mhm.
of the same thing, but to actually have more flexibility for the writer to go out and really customize that. It would still have certain tent poles, hotel reviews and all of these things, but to really go out and embed the feeling of a place, right? And be able to really bring more experience into so that that a reader could go to New Mexico for the first time and not just go to a bunch of tourist destinations, but really discover a new understanding of what that place was about, what its culture was about, what its people were about, what its food was about, and to really go a level deeper. And that was really exciting for me to be a
Mm.
part of, to really
Mhm.
be able to give people creative platform that somebody could go and really have an experience of a destination that was a few levels deeper than what they might have if they were just hitting all the high spots.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
But was
Right?
there a feedback loop at some point where you kind of realized like, oh, I'm learning like this is working. I'm kind of getting the hang of like how do I connect and like hook people?
Yeah. People would write all the time. They would write in. I
Mm.
think that they would feel what
Mhm.
I found was there's two ways. One was that people would write in all the time. They felt so, you knew it was working when they felt so connected to you. They would write letters about their trip, their
Mm.
vacation, like they knew
Mhm.
you. And they would say, I feel like I know you because
And
you're
you had like a
speaking.
byline. It's like by Cheryl.
Yeah. Yeah. And they could write in. And this would happen to the writers that I would edit too, because they would go on a trip and
Mhm.
when they would treat that book like a Bible and really refer to it and say, I had this experience that I would have never had. And I feel like I know you. I felt like your voice was in my ear. And that was really exciting to make feel like people had
Mhm.
experiences that were quite unique because of what
Mhm.
you were able to create. And we found, interestingly, that the brand got stronger when we gave the 75 writers we had around the world writing 200 books a
Mhm.
year the
Mhm.
freedom to have a stronger voice, that the brand got stronger.
Mhm.
And because people got more connected to it and they felt like it was somebody, a companion. And they told us that. And then when I would go out and I was writing full time, and even when I was editing and I would go to destinations, you just talk to people, you get to know people. And it's so
Mhm.
much fun to go out and people love to tell you about what they enjoy and tell you about what didn't work out so well or some crazy experience they had. And yeah, there was a great feedback loop. And I think because people are so invested in travel that they love, right? And what we've seen is an evolution of the travel information category to where you see how now it is really a crowdsourced world, right? You see
Mhm.
now what we do instead of going to the bookstore and buying a travel book off the shelf, usually, what we're doing instead is we're crowdsourcing TripAdvisor and we're because people love to talk about their travel
Mhm.
experiences. And I think that's kind of fun. I think it's a really, really cool thing to have all of that
Mhm.
information out there and people really sharing. People love to talk
Yeah.
about the travel. It's so
You
meaningful.
Yeah, you know something I wish was that this is like totally
Yeah.
lateral comment, but I wish there was a way to filter for taste. Because sometimes, like my partner and I, like she and I, we like to go out to eat or have some experiences, and then there'll be some reviews like, "Oh my God, this is the best restaurant on earth," and we go there and we're like, "We can make something 10 times better at home." No, thanks. And then we paid a lot of money for it. And I was like, man, I wish somebody could like filter for taste, like people who like certain. It's like, what do
Totally.
the people who have similar taste to me say? Because I have a friend from a past life in Washington, D.C. Whatever she recommended, it was just so on target. Like, so, like, yes. Like, I would not even question. And then I had some friends that I kind of moved to this blacklist and whatever they recommend, yeah, I'm not like, so I'm not going to listen to these people ever about anything. But anyway, so just putting that out there, business opportunity
That's
for
why we
somebody.
like influencers so much, right? Because
True.
it's this
Yeah.
intersection of sort of crowdsourcing
Yeah.
and people we start to trust and rely on and
Yeah.
voices that it's really interesting because
Mm.
you do start to actually trust
Yeah.
influencers that you follow out in the world because
Yeah.
you start to develop like, oh, that person likes the same things I like. I'm going to try those things.
What's really another thing that's really interesting to me is just tying back to what you were saying before about how people want to connect with other people.
Mhm.
Because now, I mean, now you can be sitting on your toilet and you write a tweet to somebody, like whatever. It's just so accessible and so easy in many ways and
Mhm.
convenient. But I'm just thinking back, like 1994, for instance, the like kind of pre-mass email, where somebody took the time to sit down and like type out a letter on a word processor, something like that, and then fold it up, mail it, find out your address, mail it to you. This is like a lot of intention and like a much heavier
Yeah.
lift than just picking up your phone and just tapping out a message in like within like 30 seconds.
Yeah.
And that people wanted to share that with you in that way, in that
I
medium,
know.
via mail, snail mail, in paper. Back then, that's really cool. There's something
Isn't it
really cool
cool?
about that.
I know. It is
Yeah,
really
it
cool.
is.
I think so
It's like, wow.
too. I know.
Hmm.
How often do you pull out paper and pen
Mm-hmm.
now and write somebody a letter and put it in an envelope and mail it
Yeah.
away? To your point, it's like, it sounds like a big, yeah, it was a different,
Yeah.
but no, people
You know,
would do that all the time.
my mom graduated high school like mid to late 60s.
Mhm.
She's always been somebody who likes to write. So she was in some kind of like a pen pal thing program. I don't know what you call it back then. And then I think she still remembers some of those people. I think she may even still be in contact with like one of those people that she was pen paling with like 60 years ago. So it's just amazing how people find a way to
Yeah.
connect.
Yeah.
And again, it's the same desire over time. It's just the technology and the built environment changes, and then you can do it in different ways, but essentially it's the same thing.
I think
That
one of
yeah.
the things that I think that's so interesting. We have a tendency to complain a lot about social media, right? We all complain about social
Mm-hmm.
media, but we participate in it. But one of the things that is so exciting and I'm so grateful for about social media is our ability to stay in contact with people from our past in ways that you
Mm-hmm.
would lose contact in the past. As somebody who's moved around a lot and who's lived all over the country and had different careers and different lives, to be able to be connected in ways that are easier and to stay in relationship with people who in another generation we probably would have lost touch. I remember as a kid, I was around a fair amount as a kid, and if we moved to the next town over, I never saw my best friend from the 6th grade again because you had to talk on the, it was just, you didn't have those abilities, those easy abilities to connect, especially when you're a kid. But I think now it's one of the things that I think is really exciting is that we can communicate with each other um,
Yeah.
so easily and maintains bonds that um, would otherwise be more
Mm,
difficult to maintain.
yeah. So I want to make one last stop here in the time machine. And I see that you were also drawn to studying and working in hospitality there.
Yes.
for a bit. What drew you to study that, and then what lessons did you draw from the world of hospitality that maybe you're still applying to your work today? I suspect that you are.
So, what drew me to hospitality? So, working in travel publishing for so many years and travel writing, I fell in love with the hospitality business. I fell in love with hotels and I fell in love with food and beverage. And I just loved travel and tourism. And so I decided once I was writing full time, which I really liked doing, but I missed I like to put things together, right? I didn't love handing away my manuscript and getting a printed book or a
Mhm,
printed magazine. I love the
mhm,
idea of bringing things together and assembling whole things. And so at one point, as I got to a point where just writing wasn't fully fulfilling for me. And so I decided to go to business school and to get my MBA. And I was living in New York City at the time, and I looked at a bunch of MBA programs. And then I looked at the Masters of Management and Hospitality at Cornell University. And I fell in love. I felt like these are my people.
mhm,
This is where I want to be because it was
mhm,
an MBA focused on the hospitality business. And my class was and it was actually there were 61 of us, I think, from 18 countries around the world,
mhm,
because Cornell is
mhm,
considered the best hospitality school in the
mhm,
world. And really, I fell in love with it was so exciting to be in around people who had come out of hotels around the world and food and beverage around the world. I thought I really wanted to go into hotel branding. That's what I thought I wanted to do, develop brands in the hotel business. I ended up at an agency and stayed on the agency side of brand building. But I just love that hospitality makes people happy. It creates experiences that bring people together, that create memories that last, that are sort of tentpole experiences in our lives. And it's all about adventure and trying new things and going new places. And I just love that as the focus of the business world. Everybody at Cornell, you go to a business school and people have lots of different goals, but everybody at Cornell and what I experienced was passionate about hospitality. They were driven by something bigger than simply making money. And that passion for the category and creating cool experiences and having a real sort of servant heart and servant mentality. You have to be in hospitality. That was really exciting to me.
mhm,
How it ended up serving me really well, even though I've worked in brand building in many categories, is the my strategy work and that I did in school was really focused on services business and services experiences. And to me, being able to turn intangibles into tangible perceptions was really how I developed my expertise in school. And I was really excited about that. So I think it's made me a different kind of strategist and a different kind of brand builder to come
mhm.
out of the hospitality space. So
Did the hospitality space teach you something about building trust with people? Tell me
absolutely.
more.
Because the hospitality one of the things that I learned it was really interesting. I came into my business degree with a lot more business experience. I was in my mid-30s by the time I went to school, but I was surrounded by people who had lots of hospitality, who grew up in the hospitality business. And the they understood that hospitality was all about connecting with people and creating moments for people and really delivering on a commitment to care for people in a way, right? In some ways, when you travel or you're in a hospitality environment, you've really got to have your guests back, right? And owning that sense of responsibility and care for others was it's a way of being that I think is really so beautiful. I think people who have a hospitality heart are so extraordinary because they put others first and they really care about, they take on willingly the responsibility to care for others and be there. And I think, and be there for others. often strangers, right? Most often strangers. And I think that that servant's heart and that hospitality mentality to find fulfillment in creating experiences and caring for others is just uh, an ultimate, it is a, it is the ultimate foundation of trust. And doing what to me, right, and the willingness to earn trust, the willingness to do what you say you're going to do and really
Mm,
earn the trust of others, I think
yeah.
is what actually happens in a great hospitality environment, that willingness to serve. And at Cornell, the motto at the Cornell Health School is life is service. And
Wow.
that is the strategic foundation. And that when you're signing up for this and this the commitment you're making is that life is service. It's about taking care of others and putting others first. And I think if you reach out, there's a beautiful vulnerability in being willing to serve and earn others' trust and deliver, be willing to sort of care and do without waiting for somebody else to do first. Right.
Yeah.
I think that's what has always magnetized me to hospitality. And I
Mhm.
think what I learned being in an environment like that. And I loved learning about business in that context. I think it
Yeah.
shapes who I am
That's
today.
Yeah, that's such a beautiful way to operate
Hmm.
because gosh, it really does just establish a feedback loop of goodness, basically, right? Because you do something good, somebody's delighted, it comes back to you, you send it back out, it comes back to you. I do notice sometimes with some younger people who are less patient because technology teaches us to be very impatient, that I sometimes observe just entitlement, just give me the thing, just instead of branding, instead of earning a relationship and earning trust, it's just like,
Hmm.
it's kind of like the F you pay me type of attitude. And I'm like, I think that's, we have to earn trust. And it's like in every interaction every day,
Yeah.
it's like encounter by encounter. It's something that we have to do every time and not just expect that, oh, I'm so great, pay me now.
I think
So
that's
I don't have a lot of
exactly,
patience for that.
I don't have a lot of patience for that either. And I don't have a lot of patience for tolerance for power dynamics, right? It's like,
Mm,
in other
hmm.
words, looking at relationships where it's like you're engaging with somebody who's all about who has the power here, right? Who has the power in the equation? It's like it's relationship being able to all at the end of the day, all we have is connection, I think, at right at the end of the day. And I think one of the things I've taught in the folks who've worked for me over the years is that, and something that's true, we do at Signal, we do great work. I'm really proud of the work
Mm,
we've done. I'm proud of the long-standing nature of that work. I'm proud of the beauty of it. What I always take away are the relationships that we create, right? How do we actually, that's what sort of lives in my mind first and foremost. The people that we work with, the people we've helped steward and become really great brand leaders, and watching them
mm,
thrive and watching them succeed and being able to and have them go, wow, because of the work we did together, this is what happened in my career. This is what happened to our brand. And that's really exciting to me. To me, that's all rooted in relationship. At the end of the day, that's what we have that lasts, I think.
mm. Given that you worked in hospitality, and I didn't know this, I didn't know that you were a fan of interior design, and this just kind of makes sense to me now. Do you have any thoughts on how the design of a physical space has an effect on people?
Yes. So I do.
No, you.
So interestingly,
Yeah.
one of my, I took this class when I was at Cornell in hospitality in design, right? From this wonderful
Mm,
professor,
mm,
Michael Redlin. And I think it was the most important thing I learned in all of my time in hospitality business school. which was to ask yourself three things when you walk in a space, right? Where am I? How do I feel? And where do I go next? And when you think about that,
Mm,
really great built environments, you want, as soon as you walk through into them, you know where you are. They evoke an emotion, they evoke or a set of emotions, feelings, and they do it with beautiful intentionality. And you've got really clear sense of where to go next, whether it's to the front desk of a hotel or nobody likes, think about the last time you walked into a restaurant, you're like, where's the host stand? Where am I supposed to check? Nobody likes that, right? You don't like that feeling. That's
mhm.
that sense of not knowing, right? That when that experience is really beautifully and intentionally managed, it's a really exciting, it's a really wonderful thing. And so think about it. Any space you walk into, where am I? How do I feel? And where do I go next? Really wonderful environments manage that experience really beautifully.
Yeah. Well, as you may know, I'm customer experience consultant, so I pay very close attention to that. And when I see work really well done, I do try to take the time to approach a person and just give them props and be like, "Hey, this you're just really nailing this." We had a stop. We my partner Amy and I were driving from Boston to Maine just recently, and we stopped at Portsmouth, I think it's called, and we went into this little vintage store,
Hmm.
and it was just everything was so well done, Cheryl. Like even the playlist from like 60s, but
Hmm.
like every song, like I was thinking of my mom because my mom really loves music and she would just like flip out if she heard that playlist. And I walked up to the guy and I was like, this is just so well done. Like every piece was just so in really great shape. And I could see the guy like just swell with pride. And you could tell that there's a lot of thought put into that. And I said, like, hey, like even, and then I come back and I said, like, is this playlist? Did you pull this together? And he had like that same smile on his face. He was like, yes, it is. I'm like, is it on Spotify? He's like, yes. He's like, can you send me the link? Like, I wanna.
That's
So I have
awesome.
it on my favorites. But it's just so great to see. I think many of us can tell when people really care. And I think that activates the feedback loop of you care and just goodness going just back and forth between you and the people you're serving.
Don't you love? I love when think about the care that goes into curating a
Mhm.
really beautiful environment at all touch points. And that's I love beautifully curated environments and experiences. When I lived in
Yeah.
Louisville, Kentucky, we had a place like that. It was actually a big sort of vintage superstore sort of. But one of the reasons we would love going there is because it was the same thing. The music was curated. Almost everyone's booth was beautifully curated. So it was like it was walking into like a little mini store, and it had such a strong sense of personality. I love when people really infuse individual personality into spaces, whether that's through the furniture or the art or the music or some combination of that, the textures and you can really see their passions come to life in their spaces.
Yeah.
And their really distinctive point of view. I think that's really exciting.
That is awesome. Well, Cheryl, coming back to present day, I just
Okay.
want to acknowledge that I deeply resonate with your company's tagline. Like a brand that powers great leaps forward is a brand that is loved. So, what else have you learned about what really sparks love for a brand in people?
Hmm. What really sparks love for a brand in people is, I
I
think,
think we were just touching on that. Yeah.
yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
I think a brand that people can see themselves in, right?
Mm,
I think authenticity sparks love in a brand. I think realness. I mentioned Southwest earlier. And when the CEO came out and said, yeah, this was we screwed up, our technology wasn't up, and we're dealing with it. People, a willingness to be vulnerable, a willingness to be imperfect. I think those things spark love in people and generosity. I think brands that spark love are really clear about what they're about. They're willing to be not for everybody. in business, it's so it every you it's counterintuitive, but you want to really say, get narrow, be really clear on who your customer is and who they're not, right? Who you resonate with and who you don't. Because we tend to want to be for everybody. And even when we say we don't want to narrow, well, but what kind of limits am I putting on my business? But the clearer
Mhm.
you are about who you're for and who you're not, um, the easier it is to find the people or for the people to find you who will really fall in love with you, right? Really be
Mm.
passionate about what you have to offer. And I think those are some of the things that spark love: clarity, distinction, right? Authenticity, realness, vulnerability, and and consistency. Consistency is one of those
Mm.
topics
Mhm.
that is so critical to brand. And it sounds sort of unsexy. Consistency sounds so unsexy. But in reality, consistency is really exciting because it really clarifies your brand, right? I mean, think about consistency
Mhm.
sounds unsexy as an idea, but think about consistency in Apple, right? What
Mhm.
a beautifully consistent brand, right? They know
Yeah.
exactly what they stand for. They know exactly how to communicate it, exactly how to signal it. And it's so seamlessly beautiful. And you can be that seamlessly beautiful, even if you're not Apple, even as a small brand. It's clarity, consistency, simplicity. I think more often there is so much noise and so much clutter, right? And I think brands that make it easy to engage are
Mm.
easier to love as well. But I think that simplicity is connected to really knowing who your customer is and who you are. That's how you get
Mhm.
that's how you get it. So,
So I think here's a good segue, like a concept I think you introduced me to recently because I never thought of it this way, is this concept of practice leadership
mm,
versus thought leadership. Can you tell me more about that?
yeah, absolutely. I've started talking about this idea of practice leadership because as it's easy to talk about thought leadership as simply the world of ideas. I love the world of ideas, but I
Mm.
think practice leadership is about providing information and a world of ideas that people can put to work, right? That are actionable, that are, when we talk about how we can really share information and share expertise in a way that we can learn from each other and be able to actually take some of what I can learn from you as an experienced consultant and really put it to work in my own realm of influence and vice versa. Can I share things about brand and about strategy and about how to strengthen your role as a brand leader that people can put to work in their daily lives, even if being a brand leader is only part of their job, right? How can they actually be a little bit better? So to me, practice leadership is about really helping people not only absorb a world of ideas, but a, immerse themselves in a world of ideas that they can actually start to apply in their own lives, in their own spheres of influence.
Yeah. So if we can maybe boil down three recommendations, like a starting point for somebody who wants to either create a brand or revitalize just a really tired brand into something that is really loved, what might be three initial things that people really need to get grounded on at the beginning of their
Yeah.
process?
Number one, I would say start with the end in mind. Know
Mhm.
what a home run is, right? And how you're going to
Mhm.
know how are you going to know when you have it, right? What's the home run and how are you going to know when you have it? It's too easy for people to get disappointed in brand initiatives when they think of them in nebulous terms. What's the win and how are you going to know when you have it? Start with the end in mind. Number one. Number two, don't skip over really setting a clear brand strategy. Really that need to sit down and say, what is it we're going to stand for? How are we going to deliver? Me, true, meaningful, and different. What's true about us, what's meaningful, what's different. And think of strategy as casting the vision and writing the roadmap. That's really critical. You need the roadmap. And then stick to it. Use it as your decision filter, right? When brands are perceived as or simply creative exercises, it's easy for them to go off the rails, to really sort of be about what people like and what people don't like. When you decide on the decision filters you're going to use, right? Cast the vision and you understand how, and use that vision and use that roadmap that you create alongside the vision, you will stay on point and you can actually rally people around that vision and that roadmap. You will stay on point as opposed to succumbing to, oh, but I don't like that color and I don't love that font, or, oh, shouldn't we say it this way? And that roadmap is really critical. So I would say, Ezekiel, start with the end in mind, take the time to set the strategy, and then rally your team around it and stick to that strategy, and you'll get where you need to go.
Yeah. So Cheryl, the name of this project is Making Business Art. What comes up for you when you hear that phrase?
Making business art. What comes up for me when I hear that? That's a great question. To me, what comes up for me is somebody said to me once, an artist said, we all have our art, right? Our art, there isn't artists and non-artists. There isn't creatives and non-creatives. We are all creative in our own way. We are all making things. And said once to a business I had, to the controller, she said, accounting is your art. And he lit up and was empowered in a way that he had never thought about before, right? So what comes up for me is that we all have our art, right? No matter what our role is. And we all have the creativity that we bring to the table in our work. And when we all bring that perspective, it gives us a new kind of freedom to make really great things happen. So I love the name of this podcast.
I mean, for me, it's an evolving project, but it's about making our work more meaningful and enchanting.
Mm-hmm.
And so I've been asking you, not with that word, but what makes a brand enchanting?
Yes.
Right, along this conversation. Now, if we take the term enchanting in itself, do you have any other thoughts to share about creating enchantment through our brands? Or not?
Yeah.
It's fine if you don't have anything to add.
It's a word that I haven't used very much, but it actually is, right? I think what enchantment brings is magic, right? And attraction. I think it's a beautiful word, and passion and excitement. And I think when we can find that magic, right? And I've actually been doing something kind of interesting, which is I started participating in a group called Level C that does brand strategy education. So I did the first phase of what is going to be 3 phases of this global group of brand strategists and designers who are doing these projects with Marty Neumeier, who is one of the most amazing brand strategists who have ever existed, and his team. And when I started doing it, I know one of the instructors, and he said, why are you doing this? Right. And he said, I'm sure all the frameworks and things like that. And I said to him, Mark, if what I learn is that I'm at the cutting edge of brand strategy, then that's awesome. Right. If that's what I learned. Right. But I think what I, and I've gone through the first phase and I signed up for the other phases because it was exciting to fall in love again with the work that I do and have this freedom to sort of realize that I had the freedom to sort of even push more boundaries and right and to stretch my own abilities into new places. And I think, and to really not have it, and to learn from other people who do what I do, and to be around and to hear their ideas and hear how they approach, right? Because in some ways I felt like, well, I know I'm really good at what I do, but I kind of live in a bubble, right? I do it with me and my people. And it's been so exciting to, I feel when you said the word enchantment, to sort of be re-enchanted with
Mhm.
what I do, because it is not, I never want my work in any kind of work I do to just feel like work. To be, I want to be passionate about it. I think when we can find that intersection of passion and work, that really magic happens there. And I think that's really exciting. I think when business and art come together, that is
Mm.
enchanting, right? And when
Yeah.
we bring
I
our
mean,
personal art to business.
yeah. I mean, we spent much of our lives working.
Yeah.
It is a life, so it's really this is more about making life art. It's
Uh-huh.
not just making pieces art. And the enchanting piece is how do we make our work more meaningful and enchanting from the inside out and the
Yeah.
outside in, so for us and the people that we're serving. So your whole story about Cornell, it was just sparking just warmth and joy and feels inside for me because I'm like, yeah, that I just love that. Have you by chance watched this show, The Bear? It's a new show.
I just started watching it. I'm probably 2 episodes
Okay.
in. Yeah.
Yeah. It's kind of hard for me to watch because I prefer to watch things that are positive and joyful, and there's just a lot of dysfunction
Yeah.
there. And I don't know, it's just emotionally, it's just a lot of emotional work for me to watch that show. I'll say that. But I'm going to spoil it for you a little bit.
That's okay.
There's a really unsavory character there that in the second season has a little bit of a transformation and kind of gets the mindset. He gets the exposure to observe and absorb the mindset of we want to blow somebody's mind, and so that becomes like the thing to do, and then you just get a lot of joy out of like like a diner at a
Yep.
restaurant. You just kind of and then you get the emotional payoff. It's like, oh, it's so good. Okay, let's do it again. The next person. And I just wish more of work was like that. Again, in the inside and then in what they're providing to other people. And I hope like this project somehow contributes to inspire people in some way to do
Do
more
you,
of that versus like predatory investing
yes.
or like
Well, do you
other
find
things that you
that
can see out there.
in your work with clients? Do you find that in your work with clients, Ezekiel, that you sometimes people have insights or realize they can do something or achieve something that they didn't
In
know?
in little bits, I do spend substantial amount of energy saying workshops. Just it's gonna sound weird, but like opening up permission or giving people permission to open up and be more creative and pull together things that are unfinished and just create just crappy drafts because that's how the real work happens is you go from
Yep.
bad to better to then great to then awesome, but you can't, the only way out is through, right? So you got to go through that process. And I think that's a reflection of how our education system is structured of like, there is one answer and one way to get to this answer. And we're going to put something in your head and you're going to regurgitate it out. And we're not really educated to solve problems,
Mhm.
except for engineering or maybe a handful of professions. And even in the undergrad, I went to this alternative undergrad with like no grades and so forth. It was like a really enriching experience. But I think still even there, it was really focused on like teaching us critical thinking and so forth. but it was mostly about the analysis.
Mm,
And I see like everybody, but also young people would benefit so much more from being taught to solve problems and be able to build models, not on best practices, which I think that's
hmm.
very limiting, but on read the context and what's the better solution for this context right here, right now. I think I'm kind of really going off the rails
No,
there,
no, I actually
but I
think,
think it's something that underpins some of the stuff that we're talking about.
yeah,
It kind of comes from some of those early experiences were shaped by that.
I think one of the things I like to say is that smart people in a room sitting around and just talking and not deciding or doing anything is a special ring of
Mhm.
hell in Dante's Inferno. Is
Yeah. Yeah.
And as a strategist, I love analysis. I love insights. I love figuring out what things say,
Mhm.
but I also love making decisions and taking action. And sometimes that path isn't going to be straight. It's going to be messier before it gets clear. And in fact, always it's going to be a little messier before it gets clear. And
Yeah.
so, but the way through it is to keep moving.
Yeah. I mean, there's workshops where we've just had people, when it's like a learning workshop, is to just pull something together that's
Mhm.
shitty. It's really rough. And just go out into the street and get some feedback on it. And people have to do emotional work, right, to
Mhm.
do that. You can tell. And some people more than others. Some people are like, yeah, I'm all in. And then some people really have, they kind of struggle. But sometimes you do see people come back and they're like, oh, I can just make something really quick and
Yeah.
validate it, right? It increases their comfort level in some instances, like, oh, I can just pull a rough draft very quickly, right, and get some feedback, or I can do experiments, or so there's just little tweaks to somebody's mindset, maybe opening some windows or doors to expand the range of how they can gather information and do things and create things in the world. That it's very rewarding. And with this project, I'm just trying to find a way to make that way much more intentional and kind of really help people like tap in and open up into a practice leadership, into a way of being that it's in a much bigger way, in a much intentional way
Well,
with more power.
so the interesting thing about what you just said, or so
Mm-hmm.
many interesting things, but one of the things that came to mind was, right, we're sort of taught from we're that we polish our work and we make it perfect and that
Mm-hmm.
kind of thing, to actually go out and sort of just put something together and start to put it out there for feedback takes a lot of vulnerability, right? And we're sort of not,
Mm-hmm.
it's almost, especially when it's yours and it's your idea and it's come from within, and to go, what do you think? And gaining that feedback can be really, people aren't used to doing that. But I think there's so much empowerment that comes when you're like, wait a minute, we can just put stuff out there and start
Mm-hmm.
working it and start getting feedback and start, and I think that when people learn that they can do that, that gets really exciting because you have to start exposing ideas to air, right? You can write things
Mm-hmm.
down on pieces of paper and you can think about them and you can talk about them, but they have to start, you have to start breathing life into them and you have to start
Yeah.
exposing them to air and pushing on them to really test them, to really sort of say, okay, well, this work, oh, well, that didn't work quite as well as I wanted it to. So,
Mm-hmm.
but this works really well. And so let's build on this and do a little more of this. And I think that's exciting. Sometimes I like to say, we can start here. I know we can get there. I'm not exactly
Mm-hmm.
sure how we're going to do it, but we can get there. I don't know what the line's going to look like, but sure, we can get there. Let's do that.
Mm-hmm.
And I think
Yeah.
that when people have that, when they're exposed to that, it gets really exciting when they start to
Yeah.
see what can happen. But there's that vulnerability you have to get past.
Absolutely. And I just want to acknowledge something you were saying earlier about brand, about consistency, that just to acknowledge that what we're talking about here happens in a spectrum, right? One end of the spectrum is vision and creation and
Yep.
imagination. And on the other end is consistency, where you have like process. And yes, you have perfected your thing, and then it's just consistently
Yep.
good once you get it to good.
That's correct.
And I think there is a practice, like a skill and a practice of not everybody can operate in all places of that spectrum. Some people are
That's
really
correct.
good at the consistency. Some people are really good at the vision. Few people can slide up and down that
Mhm.
spectrum and kind of navigate it. And it's all okay. And I think going
Yep.
back to your brand observations is about being honest and clear on who you are and what you do and what you can offer and where you're going to play in that spectrum of between vision and creation and consistency and like process at the other end. So not to favor one over the other. It's just there time and place for everything, right? Time where we need to do something new, and then time where we just need to be super consistent about what we already are good at. So just want.
One of the things I'm seeing in at least my world, right, of in is more and more people, and I think one of the things that's interesting as at least on the agency, as the agency world has sort of broken down, and sure, there are still big agencies out there, big consulting agencies, big advertising agencies, big marketing agencies, that kind of thing. But what I've seen is that sort of this layer of sort of medium-sized agencies have sort of gone away. And what we see is a lot more specialization, which I think is really exciting, right? Because I think as we get and more co-opetition, right? This idea of
Hmm.
there are people, sometimes you might compete with them for a project, but you also might join forces because what they're
Hmm.
good at, they're really good at things that you're not so good at. And I think that gets really exciting when we're better and better, when we're really clear on what we're really great at and what we're not so great at, that other people are
Yeah.
really great at. That becomes exciting. You can build teams, you can build purpose built teams. It's easier than
Hmm.
ever with the way that we're connected and how used to we've gotten to not working in the same room to actually build more purpose built teams. And I think that gets
Hmm.
really exciting when you're with somebody who's really expert at something that you're not so great at. And you bring an expertise to the table, and somebody else brings a different expertise to the table. And then for a different project, that team might get completely reconfigured. And I think that's exciting. I love that part of working right now.
Yeah. I love collegiality and just
Yeah.
being collaborative. There's just to like tie up like the enchantment and other things that we talked about. Enchantment, when I was 6, 7 years old watching the original Star Wars, it was like I was just losing my mind. Talk about being enchanted. And then in more recent times, as an older man now, learning about the process that George Lucas went through to create all of that, they had to like invent a lot of things. It
Yeah.
required a ton of vision. Uh, it was just like stress to like the millionth degree, right? To go through all of that, nobody believed in it, and it was like unique and so on and so forth. But something that I found like really cool about that whole story of that time for him is how when they were really young, like Lucas and Spielberg and some other filmmakers, they were really great colleagues, and they kind of had this agreement: when somebody makes it, we'll kind of help out the other ones come along. But then they get a lot of feedback to each other, so it's like, yeah, you're kind of competing, you're in the same space, but at the same time, like, hey, there's room to be colleagues and to help each other. And yeah, somebody's gonna make it first or second, and hopefully, help us out. Um, but I think there's a great beauty to that, and I wish there was more of that and less competition.
Yeah.
Um, less
Yeah.
like ugly competition. I think some forms of competition is good when you have your colleagues, but they're doing something really cool. It's kind of like the Beatles and the Beach Boys, where you're like, oh, damn, that's really good. Okay, so it kind of motivates you to level up,
Yep.
but it's not like a mean thing. You're just trying to like level up and keep up.
I think there's a generosity in that, that I think at
Yeah.
some point, and I think that's one of the things also about this idea of practice leadership is that there's a generosity of give what you know, right? Give what you know. I worked for a wonderful guy who I learned so much from many years ago, and he never wrote his branding book, and he should have. Right? He should have done it. And in fact, he was actually quite famous, but never actually wrote a book because he was afraid, well, if I tell people how to do it, they won't hire us. And
Mm.
obviously, I think the opposite is true. I think people do come to you if they perceive you as the expert in something. I also think, great, if there's somebody who can figure out how to read the book and learn how to do it themselves, then great. Share what at
Mhm.
some point, generosity, I just
Mhm.
believe that generosity pays. You just give of what you
Yeah.
know, and you give of what you know.
Yeah.
And it was always sad for me that he didn't write the book because he's since passed on and
Mm.
he can't do it now. And he had actually a body of work that his that he should be more broadly known for, that has been very influential in the space. And so it makes me sad that he was worried about protecting it, because I think by giving
Mhm.
by putting it actually down on paper, it actually would have
Mhm.
preserved his legacy more. But I don't know. I've just always taken the perspective of give of what you know, and that will come back
Yeah.
to you.
Something that I've learned and become very clear to me lately is it's like lyrics on a page, right? You
Hmm.
can like I remember the first time I looked up the lyrics for like a Beatles song, Hey Jude or something like that. And it was just like this little bit of lyrics on a page in black and white. And what struck me in that moment was like, wow, this became this phenomena of like a song and it's super popular and it's lasted for generations. And the thing that clicked for me in that moment is like, oh, it's how you bring things to life.
Yeah.
And even if you have the tools and the things, it's how each is how you bring it to life. Even if somebody remakes a song, sometimes the remake of a song is so amazing because it's brought to life
Yes.
in this different way, but it's still awesome. And I don't think one thing detracts from the other. It's just different ways of just expression in the world. So I think, yeah, well taken. Be generous and just see what somebody else does with it. Maybe it's just something wonderful.
Maybe it's something, maybe they advance it beyond what you can. And I
Yeah.
think that's exciting. It's funny you said that about, you mentioned the Beatles earlier, and this idea of taking an idea and sort of
Hmm.
putting it out there, even in its messiest form. It's really kind of how the Beatles went into the studio on a regular basis, right? If you've watched Get Back, and right, they went in with
I
sort of these
did.
fragments and these ideas and how they sort of watched them take shape. And it was so exciting to sort of watch that process. But, it's to your point, you come in with sort of, I have this idea, this little scribble, I have this riff, and I have this, and then these iconic songs emerge, but they emerge from just
Yeah.
molding and shaping, and it was an exciting process to
I
watch
watched
that
the
happen.
whole thing of Get Back. I
Yeah, me
watched
too.
all of it, the
Yeah,
whatever 8 hours of it
we
that
did
it
too.
was.
We watched it too.
And something that even though like toward the beginning there was like some abrasion,
Mhm.
and I think Paul kind of chilled out after a bit.
Yep.
But something that really struck me is even toward the end, like they were like 2 days away from this big performance, and then they're just like screwing around.
Yeah.
It's like just being super silly and playing. And I think to me, like I historically, I unfortunately have had the character trait of taking things like way too seriously. I'm like, wow, you can just play, and it's just so much more joyful approach to life, this brief life that we have here on this
Yeah.
earth. It's like just yeah, it's just bring more levity and love and connection and these many other things. But it's like, why be so solemn? It's like
Yeah.
it's just no good reason for it.
Yeah. At this stage of my life, I'm one of my goals is to make more space for play. I think I've
Awesome.
worked really hard. I'm very hard worker. I'm very stoic. I'll do whatever it takes to get something done. But I'm kind of at a place where it's like, I want more space. You know what I mean? For that play,
Hmm.
because it's so easy to get into that drive of working hard and making things happen and getting things done, that you actually don't have space to stop and really reflect and play. And I don't know about you, but for me, it's when I create that space is when my most creative ideas emerge, right? Not when I'm working really
Hmm.
hard at it. It's one of the reasons I've done this sort of global masterclass, because it's play space, right? It's space to do what I do, but without, you know, much more play realm, right? because it doesn't have the consequence of a contract and a
Yeah,
client and all of these things. And so you get to push and play a little bit more.
I support that. What's come into focus in workshops in the last few years that I finally noticed is for people who are just listening, is if I'm making a fist, like constriction
Hmm.
doesn't help us. But if we can go, I notice in workshops when people go from constriction, like a metaphorical closed fist, to an open hand to this,
Hmm.
it's just such a difference. And the work becomes, it flows, not to say that it's easy, like you just sit there, but it's a very different energy and it's just so much better process than being constricted and in fear and tense and
Energy,
etc.
how energy moves throughout a room and a group of people and makes a huge difference as to what that group can achieve. I'm excited for you all as you move toward more walking alongside people, not just in the ideation phase, but further along that innovation
Hmm.
journey and helping people bring innovations to life. I'm excited for you because I think it's fun to sort of watch all of that things come to light and
Hmm.
have people realize what they can achieve and helping them do that. And so
Thank you.
it's an exciting spot to be in.
Well, Cheryl, we're at the end of our conversation here, and before we wrap, I have a lightning round of questions,
Okay.
and feel free to pass, but I do invite you to play. And the first question is, can you describe your closet and what state it's in?
Oh, so my closet is a walk-in closet and I've only lived in this house for about 6 months. So it's evolving,
Hmm.
right? So it is actually, it's gained a new level of evolution recently, but it is not yet color coordinated. So I have cleaned it out and I don't have things stacked on top of each other anymore, but it is not yet color coordinated. It also is, I
Hmm.
recently put in some wallpaper and a beautiful lamp and a nice dresser. So it actually feels like a room now. And I really like being in there.
Very nice. It's like bringing interior design to all interiors.
Everything can
Very
be a
good.
sanctuary, Ezekiel.
I amen to that. Next question is, what's the last piece of media that you loved? And that can be a book, a movie, a podcast, or anything else.
Oh, I just read A Gentleman in Moscow, which is a book by Amor Towles, which came out a few years ago it's fiction, but it takes place during the Russian Revolution. And it is about a count who is banished to house arrest at the Hotel Metropole in Moscow. And it follows about 50 years of his house arrest. And it is so beautifully written and so much fun to read. I can't recommend it enough.
Very good. What is something that inspires you?
What inspires me? My hometown, I live in Palm Springs, California, and it really
Hmm.
inspires me. The desert
Hmm.
inspires me. It is Palm Springs is an architectural mecca. It's a mid-century modern architectural mecca, and that inspires
Hmm.
me. And people, I call it, it's sort of like adult summer camp here. People love that it's people want to have fun here and they want to live loudly and colorfully. And I find that to be very inspiring.
That's on brand, Cheryl. I have to say, what's a song or band that you must play during a road trip?
Oh, that I played during a road trip. So when I was my first favorite band when I was a kid was Cheap Trick. And
Hmm.
so because I found that one of their records in my dad's record collection and I fell in love with them. So I've been listening to them my whole life. So I will sometimes on a long road trip start at the beginning of their catalog and listen
Oh, well,
to everything. They actually have some later records that are really good. They still make records, believe it or not. But there's some rough patches in the middle that I will even power through.
yeah. Well, that's all creative work, right? All creative work. And last question is, what do you want to see more of in the world?
Ah, I want to see more generosity and I want to
Mm,
see more assumption of best intent. Because I
mhm.
think often when we miss with people, we kind of assume not good intent. But I think when we assume good intent in others, even if we miss each other, it has us see the world in a whole different way. So assumption of
Absolutely.
best intent.
All right, Cheryl. So we're at the end of our conversation. I just want to open up some space for you to share why should people look you up and where
Ah,
can they find you and what you
yeah.
have going on.
Yes. So you can find me. So people should look me up, especially if they have questions about brand or they're interested in undertaking a branding project or just want to talk about brand because I love to talk about brand and what brands can do. You can find me, my company at signalbrand.co, signalbrand.co. You can find me. The easiest place to find me is on LinkedIn, Cheryl Farr on LinkedIn. You can also find me for fun, you can find me on Instagram at Mid Century Chic,
Mhm.
which is where I sort of play and have fun and show off the things I love in the world. And also at Harry Carson Speaks, which is where my Shih Tzu gets a hold of the
Oh,
internet and has some fun.
yes. And let's shout out. Did I see that you have an Airbnb? Is
Oh, I
that
do.
still
I
active?
do have an
Oh, shout
Airbnb.
that out. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. So I have an Airbnb here in
Hmm.
a historic mid-century complex called the Ocotillo Lodge. And that is my Airbnb is called Polynesian Palms. And you can find it on Facebook and on Instagram and on Airbnb. And if you go to my mid-century chic page, there is a link there. It's very cool. It is a modern, sophisticated tiki oasis. So here in the desert. So for anybody who thinks that they might enjoy it, the best compliment I ever
Yeah.
got was it's not as outrageous as it looks in the pictures.
Well, it's very colorful and very visually rich.
It is.
And it's that, and it is also very coherent.
Yes,
And what the first thing that came up for me when I was looking at the photos was like, oh, Cheryl had a really good time. She had a lot of fun pulling this together because it looks like it has a lot of intention.
it does. It
Yeah.
does. It was talk about projects that get you start with a couple of pieces that inspire you and then start to put the components together. I love that. I love projects like that. I like to create coherence out of out of vision and bring them into coherent whole. And that's really exciting for me. So
Yeah.
I love to play in interior design and fashion and color, and all of those things make me really happy and travel. So thank you for having me, Ezekiel. It's been absolutely wonderful.
Cheryl, thank you so much for carving out time and spending your valuable time with me today. It's just been lovely to find out more about you and your perspectives and how that inspires me and hopefully some listeners in making business art, making wonderful art out of their business and life. So
Thank
thank you
you.
very much.